Foul is Fair. Chapter 12, Dining Room Blitz. Despite Kasha's assurances, Megan and Lani alike insisted they didn't want to remain in the West Wing for dinner. Aisling, after checking that Rhea Cart's door was unlocked, led them through the twists and turns toward the more shared areas of the castle. A glance into one of the dining halls along the way made Megan all the happier for her choice. While the food was largely identifiable, and at least not human, the sight of some of the creatures within tearing apart their food, snapping bones to get to the marrow, or consuming whole organs pulled from carcasses almost made Megan lose her appetite. The scent of food coming from one of the larger halls brought most of it back. "Yeah," she said, "this is far enough. I'm starving." Entering, they were met immediately by what Megan was pretty sure was a brownie, judging by her previous encounters. The short, rumpled person led them to seats near the head of the table, then curtsied and scampered off. Before long, another one that Megan was pretty sure was a bit more masculine brought them drinks. Megan was about to drink when Lani put her hand on the cup. "Megan will have a glass of water," she whispered to the brownie, as much as it could be a whisper in a crowded room. "And so will I." He nodded and shuffled off again. Kasha and Aisling hadn't seemed to notice, the former draining her own cup and demanding another, while Aisling and the Count worked out sharing a cup, ignoring the offer of something more suitably pixie-sized. Megan looked at Lani expectantly. "Fairy food and drink, especially drink, can be tricky stuff," Lani muttered. "To be safest, avoid the fruits and the wine." Megan nodded her understanding. Water glasses followed, and the food was served not long after. Megan did her best to keep Lani's warning in mind, though her mind kept wandering off through the meal. There were several occasions where her hand almost reached for a huge, juicy golden raspberry from the bowl on the table before her eyes met a worried Menehune frown. Still, she wasn't deprived. The rest of the food was the best she could recall having ever eaten, with flavors that were somehow fuller and richer than she could remember tasting. In the same way, the colors were brighter and the mountains taller. Of course, it helped not to have any appetite-suppressing medication anymore, too. The table brought a constant show to go with the meal as well, with what seemed to Megan to be at least half a dozen different languages being spoken around her by all manner of fairy creatures. She kept trying to make mental notes about the look of the laden bowls of multicolored fruit, or of the bunny person, or the twisted-faced goblin next to him, or of the guy in black who set his head down on the table while he cut his steak. She wanted to memorize each sight to draw later, but always found her eyes wandering on to the next oddity. Her attention was drawn back to her immediate surroundings when she heard Kasha exchanging heated words in a language she didn't understand with what she guessed was a leprechaun, based on stature and dress. As they spoke, more and more of the fairies at the table started to rise to bunch around one or the other, showing their support, but starting to make Megan feel rather crowded. She looked to Lani, and the pair started looking for a way out of the crowd, but didn't see any easy gaps as more and more people were rising from their spots at the table to gather around. The tension broke when the leprechaun splashed the contents of his mug at Kasha. The easy smile Megan had gotten used to on the satyr's face twisted into an animalistic snarl, and Kasha lunged, leaping to the tabletop in the process. When the smaller fairy dodged, she ended up tackling one of the hag things instead, sending her flying into one of the knots of redcaps and less identifiable but unsavory-looking things. From there was no stopping the brawl. Megan grabbed for Lani's hand, holding tight. Lani pulled suddenly, dragging Megan out of the way of a staggering thing with a goat's head. Megan returned the favor by dragging Lani to the floor before they were struck with a flying chair. The guy in black hadn't even put his head back on before getting involved. In the process of standing back up, she came eye to eye with one of the brownies. "King's daughter, this way," the small girl, at least she thought this one was a girl, said. Megan at first wondered how she knew, but supposed word would get around all the faster after her father had enforced his secret for so long. Still clutching Lani's hand, She did her best to weave through the crowd after the brownie, who seemed to know precisely the right places to dodge in navigation of the shifting melee. When they reached the far wall, the brownie gestured, then backed against the wall. Megan only realized what happened when she looked to either side of herself. Lani and the brownie, and Megan herself, she supposed, blended into the wall perfectly. She watched the fight going back and forth for some time, eyes darting around the room, and otherwise trying to stay very still lest the brownie's illusion fail. Things were starting to settle again, as if on some kind of cue she couldn't detect, when she noticed him. The 49ers red cap was sitting at the far end of the table, stripping meat off a chicken bone with those jagged, graying teeth, paying the fight no mind. Even with people moving between them, his gaze never wavered. Illusion or not, he was looking towards Megan and just smiling while he ate. When things did settle enough that the brownie dropped the illusion, the girls were only too happy to leave, even when offered more food and drink. A slightly weaving Aisling and a grinning Kasha, now with a brand new black eye, chose to follow along, heading back for Riacard's room. The redcap stayed at the table, but continued to follow Megan with his gaze until she'd rounded the corner.